Welcome to the Intuitive Inc. radio show live with your host, Servet Hassan, with another inspiring author who can help you discover your true potential. Live on Clear Source Radio.
Hello, everybody. It's Sunday night. The name of the show is Intuitive Inc., and I am Servet Hassan. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I've got a show for you tonight that you're going to be dying to listen to, and it's about end-of-life care. So don't go away. Come back. Don't leave. It's not like that, because the person I have on the line today is awesome, and she's been helping people understand the mysteries that occur around the whole end-of-life business. So, and I learned a lot from her book, and I will talk about that in a second. But her name, first of all, is Dr. Lynn B. Robinson, and she is a professor emerita of marketing and a former business consultant, which is kind of interesting that she transitioned, I'll learn to talk here, into this, but that's because she was also a hospice and community service organization volunteer, and she was also a facilitator for a local affiliate group of IANS, and we will talk about that. First of all, though, let's welcome Dr. Lynn Robinson. How are you?
I'm just wonderful tonight, and I hope not only you are, but everybody who's listening is feeling fabulous as well.
Yeah, we are. Where are you calling from, Lynn?
I'm calling from the deep south on the Gulf Coast of Alabama.
Oh, wow. Okay, because I heard that little southern twang, and I loved it, and I thought I knew she's calling from somewhere down there, so that's fantastic. I didn't mention, let me mention the name of your book. It's called Loving to the End and On. And the subtitle is A Guide to the Impossibly Possible, which I like because, you know what? Life is a guide to the impossibly possible, don't you think?
Well, it certainly has been for me. And I've been working at it a long time.
Yeah, me too. Let me tell you. Yeah, me too. Anyway, we're going to get in now. How does a professor who's involved in marketing and business and everything else in between there, I'm sure, which is all corporately designed, end up doing what you've done and then coming out with a book like Loving to the End and On? I do believe it's because somebody asked you to do a class, correct? To teach a class.
That is true.
Right. I read the book, so I know. And by the way, it's very good because I learned a lot. I did. I mean, it's interesting because you think, oh my God, this is going to be a very macabre subject, and it's not. We're all going to go there at some point, and or we're all going to know somebody that goes there. So it's really, you did it so well, and you did it so, I have to say, lovingly.
Thank you.
To the end of the book. Loving to the End and On is the name of the book. Anyway, so you were asked to do a class, correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm. You want me to explain that?
Yeah, do, please. It's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, as you said, I have 3 degrees in business, bachelor's, master's, and Ph.D. in business, and, you know, I've taught, I've been an administrator in a college of business, but I've also made friends in a lot of other areas, and I have a friend who was a dean of nursing at a university that has an online curriculum as well as a physical curriculum. And she called me one time because she knew that I facilitated a local group of the International Association of Near-Death Studies. I am not an NDEer. That, for those of your listeners who don't know, there's a phenomenon that is called the near-death experience where people flatline, but then they're brought back, and many of them remember phenomenal things who happened while they were out of their physical bodies, being classified as dead by the medical community until they're no longer dead. They're back, and they talk about that. So because of my own life, where even with all of my practical business experience, for some reason I've been one of those people who communicates with those no longer in physical bodies. What that means is that people who other folks may think are dead talk to me and give me messages. I guess in some worlds that's called a medium. I've never considered myself such a thing, but for some people, if you want to call me that, that's fine. But the messages that I've delivered are things that I had no way of knowing, and sometimes was very skeptical about delivering those messages. So at any rate, that led me to be interested in the IONS group, and I thought I could help them because I did things just naturally without having to die to do some of the things that they died and then resuscitated and had done. This nurse, the dean of nursing, knew that about me and called and said, I really would like our program to offer an online course in near-death experience, and would you do that for me? And I had been retired from academia for a long time, but I thought, that's irresistible. Of course I'll do that. So, make a long story short, we would jump through all kinds of hoops to get that done and created a curriculum. I had to take a course in how to do an online curriculum thing, and which was fun because it was something new for me. But when we got to the final stages of getting the course approved, the vice president of the university to whom she reported looked at all of this and said, well, even though you've gotten this figured out where all of her business curriculum would qualify her to teach in a nursing program, we were going to do a program in management but use all of the examples of management having to do with how to deal with NDEers and in that way teach the NDE course. And he looked at all that and he said, well, that would be fine, except we just can't do it because she might talk about talking to dead people, and we just can't have that.
Right, I read
so,
that.
When my dean of nursing friend called to apologize profusely, I said, don't worry about it. I'll just turn it into a book. But the book is not the course. It took on a life of its own and became what it is, which is far more than talking about NDEs. And for me, it was a far richer experience to write it because it could talk to anyone and everyone who has dealt, who is dealing, or will deal with, and that's all of us, someone who's in their terminal illness. And there's so many, many rich, beautiful possibilities for that last loving experience in the body, and then being open to those experiences that come when your loved one is no longer in the physical body. So that's kind of a long answer, but that's it.
No, and it's a good one, and you explained it in the book well, because you don't just talk about communicating with people who have passed on to another dimension. You talk about what a healthcare provider can give, what a medical person can give, and then just people in general that are taking care of loved ones too. That's important because you had some good tips there. You had some how to make better decisions and all. We'll get to that.
Yeah, okay.
No, I just think it was really, really interesting. And also I think we need to tell people what IANS stands for, which I believe is International Association for Near-Death Studies. And
That's correct.
Yeah, and did you start that?
No. I started a local affiliate group.
Oh, okay. So that's because I know you're very involved in it. And that also helps people because a lot of people have experiences, and I'm sure you discovered this writing the book, and you talk about it in the book, where they do have experiences, and then they're afraid to talk about it because they think people are just going to think they're nuts, right?
Yes, that is absolutely correct. And it gets so bad in some instances that people really need support. I'm thinking of, and I think I mentioned both of these in the book, I'm not sure, but in one instance, a young woman who had an experience and nobody in her family wanted to hear it. It contradicted some of their religious views, and it scared them. And she needed support. And she also well, after her experience, she went to work in a funeral home because she was quite comfortable there. That, you know, dying no longer bothered her because she knew it wasn't the end. And then she had the experience of those people who were no longer in their bodies but were remaining close to their bodies, who wanted to get messages to their loved ones, found out that they could use her as a conduit. And she didn't know how to shut them out. So I taught her to do that. You can do that within your. It's like changing channels on a radio. You can just move the channel and you no longer hear the voice. But sometimes you have to learn a little bit about how to do that. And then, you know, we had a minister from a fundamentalist church who had done services literally around the world, and he had a near-death experience. He lived 2 states away, and he heard about our group in Mobile, and we were the closest group to him. So he made the trip to Mobile, which is where I am, which is where just to talk to people who would accept what had happened to him. His church no longer wanted him to preach because he was preaching differently than he had previously. His family was scared of what had happened to him, and so he needed support. And he came to us and got that support, and he was so sweet, bless his heart, after he went back. That's Southern, isn't it?
Yeah, I love it.
went back to Louisiana, he would call me every now and then and say, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I just need to talk to somebody. And eventually he became a hospice chaplain.
Oh.
And so he used his skills as a pastor, but he changed the venue in which he did it.
Fantastic.
And to me, that was just a beautiful outcome for a life-changing event for him. And some people just need to find those outlets. I will tell you about the International Association of Near-Death Studies. There's a program now that's being developed where they're going to have some online meeting groups for people who don't have a group in their hometown. They can go online to IANDS, IANDS, and find out where and when there will be some online groups available. And they now even include some people from other countries since it's available that way. So that's very exciting to me for people who need that kind of support.
Right, exactly. I think that's very exciting too. Again, they do need help, you know. And it's not just people who've had people who have had a near-death experience. You said something interesting in your book, and I wrote it down because you said it's not near death, but in death, which I thought was kind of cool because, I learned a lot. I didn't know that Steve Jobs said, his last words, according to several media accounts, was, oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow, you know? And that
wasn't that fun?
It was fun. And Loretta Lynn talking about how she saw her good friend Johnny Cash, and it happens to us. I just don't think people talk about it. And the funny thing is that when you said in your book when you started doing this, you had quite a few family members and friends that suddenly, and then people giving you messages to give to their loved ones. Like I think you found a box, or somebody told you about a box under a bed. Do you remember that? It was just really fascinating to me because it was a message for a woman who had passed that she wanted you to give to her son. And I just found that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm remembering the one that you talked about.
Right.
Yes.
Because I know how this goes. I've been interviewed, too, with books I've written, and they'll go, on page 122, you said, and I'm like, hell, I wrote that book, by the time it comes out, it's been a year already, and I'm like, what? So I get that. But it was fascinating to me because then suddenly you were faced with good friends and family that were transitioning. So I'm sure that impacted what you're talking about in this book, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it continues to. I never know when something's going to come through. And I don't do this professionally. This is just something that has happened in my life, and I seem to be open and available. Although I will tell you, it's important to know how to learn to turn it off, too. because I assume there are a lot of people who are no longer in physical bodies who would like to have some way to get through. And you could be bombarded by that sort of thing all the time, like having your phone ring constantly and you just want it to quit.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to learn to turn that off.
So what do you do? What do you do personally to turn that off?
I can't explain.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Changing channels is fine.
It's like changing channels in my brain. I can shut it down. It's like turning off the TV. It's like turning down the radio.
Mm-hmm.
You just switch the energy in your brain to a different area.
Right. But Lynn, it sounded to me like when I was reading the book that it's not something like somebody can call you and say, hey, can you talk to my Auntie Jane that died, 10 years ago? I think it's more that the impression I got is that it just comes to you.
Well, it does, with one exception. There are times when I do try to get in touch or have tried to get in touch with people. And one of the ways that has worked better for me to find an opening to a person, and I may be sorry I'm telling you this while I'm talking to a lot of people because I don't do this professionally.
No,
so I'm not offering to do this for people. But one of the things that I have done for close friends is that they will bring me something physical of that person's, a ring, a sweater, whatever. Mm-hmm. And I hold it, and it's as though that item has retained some of the energy of the person. Mm-hmm. And in that way, and I'm not even trying to change this, to explain this with physics or metaphysics or any of the sciences that we now know, because I don't really think we've gotten there yet. But somehow the energy of that person becomes viable for me. And when that happens, a channel of some kind opens up, and I do begin to get information that can be passed back and forth between me and the person who brought the item and the person who had worn or to whom that item had belonged.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Have you ever had a spirit or someone on another dimension, is how I'm going to explain it. Have you ever just had them not answer or say, no, don't bother me, go away?
Sure.
Yeah, I would think so.
It's like you call somebody and they don't pick up the telephone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of like really long distance.
I'm not in the mood to answer right now, so I'm not going to answer the phone.
Yeah, that's really long distance when we're calling on another level here. But the thing I like about it is that it takes away this kind of, because you say continuously throughout the book, and that you're not demanding that readers try to share your beliefs or even those of the stories that are told, but that you just sort of look at it with an open mind, because then it kind of like takes you to a different place. And I think what it does in the end is take away that fear, right?
I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten some really incredible feedback about that. One of the things that has made me so happy recently is that someone I don't know who had read the book emailed someone I do know and she knew that person knew me, and so circuitously I found out that she had read the book and it had allowed her to begin telling her stories to other people.
Right.
And that absolutely thrilled me. If my book will encourage people to do that, to people who've had things happen, but they just thought, I can't tell anybody that, or that didn't really happen. Mm-hmm. It couldn't have really happened. But if they can then get the courage to talk to somebody else and people start sharing the stories, it's remarkable how many people have had these kinds of stories. There are two other things that I say in the book that I always like to say when I'm talking to people, and one is, just for a moment, suspend your disbelief. Mm-hmm. Right. And the other one is, you're more than your physical body.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's true. And we are more than our physical bodies. I truly believe that. And the other thing, one of the other things I find that you did really well in this book is that you explain that, when people are still here and are passing, they're going to see things and hear things and say things. And what a lot of people try to do is talk them out of it instead of just listening and suspending their belief again, like you're saying. And if they did, that's very helpful, I think, because I think they don't need someone to discount what they're saying. They just need someone to support them at the time, right? I'm
so glad you brought that up, because that is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Is just share whatever they're experiencing and rejoice in it, rather than imposing what you're thinking and feeling. You're in a totally different space than the person who is in the process of leaving their body. Their physical body is dying, and their experiences are unlike those who are not going through that. And so I'm really glad you brought that up. Just accept it, go with it, sort it out later, but be in the moment with them and appreciate whatever they're telling you.
Exactly. And I really wanted to point that out because I thought that was important too. I enjoyed that part. Also, in that same discussion, you talk about something, you're saying listen so that you can, listen better. And you talk about a method, a whole brain method, which I found fascinating. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yes. Ned Herman, who is no longer in his physical body, did a lot of work when he was working for a major international corporation on figuring out the way people listen and respond, and he created a whole brain methodology. The HBDI is the Herman Brain Dominance Instrument, which is the format of a self-administered set of questions that you answer, and the result of answering those gives you a profile of how you are more likely to think. And it's really a metaphor for the brain, and it's a simplistic one because it divides the brain into 4 kinds of thinking quadrants, and it gives you a clue as to where you are most likely to do your thinking and response, where in terms of his 4 quadrants. So it's a very simple process, actually, to looking at how you approach both thinking, speaking, and responding to people. And what it does is explain that all of us do not think in exactly the same ways, so it's helpful. And this is not something that people who are in the dying process would use. It's not even something that most probably people who have someone dying would use, but certainly medical personnel can use it. And after the fact, before you're with someone else who you love is dying, it's something that you can use to take a look at yourself to say, okay, am I likely to be someone who's extremely analytical, for instance, which is 1 quadrant, but not very feeling in the way we listen? And if so, how does that affect what I'm seeing and observing and doing with the person who I am loving? I happen to be someone who is, no surprise to you, very avant-garde in my thinking. I sort of think out of the box. And as a result, it affects the way that I approach problem solving. I'm likely to look for things that others don't look for, or see things that others would not see, and can bring that to the table.
Right.
So that's what that chapter is all about. But in the book, there are some examples of how you can see that in care for a loved one and within the medical community. It is a very helpful model to figure out what you're doing, how you're doing it, why you're doing it, and it can be so useful in making sure that a loved one gets total care, not just physiological care, but also psychological and emotional care, because it takes all of that.
Right, it does. It absolutely does. That's why I brought it up. And then, big surprise, I'm the one that thinks out of the box too, because so I found that fascinating, because it was, But that's really, really helpful. So there's all kinds of things like that in here that I think, there's stories from scientists, from doctors, nurses, caregivers, and then also people that communicate with people on the other side. But that's not what it was. I don't think that was your intent. I think your intent was that just happens anyway, right?
Well, it certainly does.
Mm-hmm.
My initial intent for the book, as I told you, in the beginning of our conversation,
right, to do a
just
class,
melded and merged and became its own path.
Right.
And the book became what it is, which is a lot more than just stories about after-death communication.
It would have really been a great class if he didn't care if you talked to dead people, So I guess that's his loss. That's their loss. Because really, honestly, I mean, come on, I think everybody, and that's the thing, we really just should take that stigma away and, just understand that we're just on another, I think you put it well. It's like turning a channel. So like if you're watching channel 7, that doesn't mean channel 2 doesn't exist. It's still there. It didn't go anywhere. It's, so I totally believe that. And I've had experiences of my own where I was almost killed and a car missed me by like an inch. You could feel the engine. And I heard someone who had passed away almost 20 years ago now, 23 years ago. But this was about 10, he'd been gone about 10 years and was a great love of my life. And I heard him distinctly say, just like he was standing next to me, "Oh, it's not your time." And I never forgot that, and I never heard him again. Never. That was just that one flash. And I heard it. I heard his voice. It was just, and until it happens to you, you can't really, because I know there are naysayers out there, people that just don't buy this. But I honestly think when it happens to you, then you're like, okay, and it.
Absolutely.
And
it's very shocking to some people, and it scares them because for whatever reason they were told it couldn't be possible. And it's those people who need to be able to sort of step outside of that fear and have somebody with whom they can talk or ask a question
right.
And that's a big part of the reason that I wrote the book is hopefully people will start talking to each other. And I think that the experience you have with that love of your life was absolutely fabulous.
No, it was.
I'm so glad to hear about it.
Yeah, it was. And, but then again, I'm still going to have people say to me, how do you know you're just not hallucinating? How do you know that's just not a figment of your own imagination as opposed to a vision or something else? Now, for me, I just knew it wasn't anything I cooked up. Do you know what I mean? It was real to me. It was very real. It was his voice. Okay. Do you know?
I believe it was very real, but for those people who are scared to accept it and think it was a figment of their imagination, my comment would be, what a marvelous figment of your imagination. Hold on to it, cherish it, and one day it may even become more than that.
I love it. I love that answer. That's wonderful. And okay, so we're halfway through the show. Can you believe that, Lynn? I really can't believe that, but we are. So we are on the line here with Lynn, Dr. Lynn B. Robinson, who's written a book called Loving to the End and On, a guide to the impossibly possible, and that's exactly what it is. So how can people find the book or find you? And are you doing work with this? Are you doing workshops or?
Well, I haven't. I suppose that I can be available. I don't travel as much as I used to. I'm not as young as I once was, but I do sometimes still travel. And if somebody was interested, you can go to www.lynnbrobinson.com, and there's a contact page where you can get in touch with me, and we could have a discussion about that. So that's the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Right.
Is that way.
Okay, I'm going to spell it because it's Lynn with two N's, B,
yes,
the letter B like boy, and then Robinson just like Robinson, ROBINSON.
With no spaces.
With no spaces.com. And I'm sure they can find the book there as well. But the really good thing about your book too is at the end of the book you give a ton of resources. So can they find that? Yeah, you do. And can they find that on the website as well? Or if not, just should get the book?
No, they have to go to the book to get those resources. That's not on the website. Good. And the resources, in some instances, are divided by the kind of interest you may have, just as well as by the categories of kinds of authors in some instances. For some people who just like to watch movies and don't want to read, there's a whole list of movies that sort of give you an idea of what these things are all about, even though many of them are fictional. Some of them are based on absolutely true stories. So that's available. And of course, you can get movies all sorts of different ways now. And there are also websites that you can take a look at. So, yeah, there are a lot of resources that are available.
I found that fascinating because I didn't know that Loretta Lynn did a movie about her experiences with seeing Johnny Cash, because she recorded in his studio after he'd passed on, and they were good friends. And then he just...
I know.
That was fascinating.
So exciting to me because my brother, whose name I won't mention, has written a lot of lyrics for very famous country singers. So when I found that, I was so excited to send it to him because he's not totally open to these sorts of things himself. But my book has helped him more than anything else I've ever told him to read, so I'm excited about that. And you asked where you can get the book. You can get it online at Barnes & Noble. You can get it online at Amazon. I noticed recently that Walmart has it online.
Yay! Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. High five on that one. Yes, Walmart even. And it's called Loving to the End and On. And why not? They should have it. A Guide to the Impossibly Possible. What made you say that what made you pick that subtitle? I love it. It is a guide to the impossibly. Is it because we just don't know what's possible, right?
Pretty much, and I have so many friends who are skeptical. So that was a way of including all of my friends with me.
Good.
They think it may be impossible. I think it's impossible. So we're all in there together.
Good.
In fact, the first chapter is about one of my very best friends ever in my whole life, who was supposed to live to be very old with me because her parents lived to be in their 90s, as did my father, and she died in her 70s. And so the first chapter is about her, and she didn't believe any of this. She just sort of tolerated me. It was like, okay, Lynn, you know, that's okay. I love you anyway, until she had her own experience as her husband was dying.
Right, and then you heard him say something to you, not physically, but in telepathically, and then you told her, and it was true. And then shortly thereafter, I think he passed, and then she didn't stay long after that, right?
Only a couple of years.
Yeah, it was not very long. So I remember reading that. Okay, well, I want to discuss the difference between that and ghosts and angels. But first of all, I am going to open the lines. So if there are any brave people out there who have a question for Dr. Lynn Robinson, call us, 313-8880. The show is going quickly. I mean, we're already more than halfway through. I should have said that earlier. So if there is anyone out there that has a question about perhaps someone who is near death, or I should say in death, or who has already passed to another place, you can call us now, 949-313-8880. So, yeah, I wanted to touch on that, Lynn, because you did discuss angels, too. So what is the difference? Or is there one?
I suppose that just as we have people here in different sorts of professions and et cetera, that we have people who are not in their physical bodies, and we may also have entities in the world that have never been in physical bodies. There are people who are more helpful to others, and I don't consider myself someone who can describe angels specifically so much as to think that they're there and they're helpful. And that's about the best I can do for you.
No, that's okay. That's a good answer. But I'm just saying, are some of the people that do pass, and they come back, we can think of them as our angels, even if we don't. If they're just helping. They're just trying to help us, I think. I don't think anyone's...
absolutely. Right. I think, I don't remember if I told this story in the book or not, about a couple of guys I helped one time who kept having things being moved around their house. And so I went to their house and picked up on a couple of guys who were there and described them to these two young men, and it turned out in one instance it was the uncle of a guy, and this uncle had passed on, but he seemed to be hanging out to help this guy who was very young and moving into the world of business, and he was just there sort of looking over his shoulder. I would, if you want to call that as a guardian angel, I would certainly do that. And the other one had a man who had worked for his family for years, and had helped him learn to do a lot of things as a young boy, and they were very close. Even though he was not a family member, he was a paid worker of the family, but they were very close, and he just continued to hang around and come back in whatever form that takes to help the young man out when he had any need for help.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's what I think too. I think if someone wants to come help, they can. I think if they're being mischievous, or I don't think they're necessarily evil, but if they're doing anything that's not right, I think we can block that too, just like we can with people here on the planet. Everyone's not nice to us. Do you know what I mean?
Right. So you pay no attention to them.
Yeah, exactly. The more attention you pay to anything, the more it grows.
It's like if you answer one of these junk phone calls that you get and you think this is absurd, you just hang up.
Exactly. Well, I can see, because your first book was called Coming Out of Your Psychic Closet, How to Unlock Your Naturally Intuitive Self, which I think is really awesome. So you've always known you were intuitive, right? Always
is not really accurate. I probably was as a child, but but as a child you don't even know the word intuition.
What it means, yeah.
By the time I was a teenager, I guess I became aware that sometimes I knew things without knowing how I knew them, which is pretty much my definition of intuition, is you know things without knowing how you know them.
Right. Well, me too, and I've same with me, but I finally figured out that intuition is just like, how you have natural instincts of your brain that it tells you when to breathe, it tells you how to digest your food. If we had to do that ourselves, we'd all be dead probably. But that, it's just our natural instincts of our mind, and I think the natural instincts of our soul is called intuition. It's just our natural connection to our higher source. And I think I think we all have it, just some of us experience it more than others, you know?
Which takes me back to that favorite saying of mine, we're more than our physical bodies.
Exactly. I don't think we just fell out of a box one day and here we are on Earth. It's
right.
And
so,
I don't think...
So we tune into the more.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with that. Okay, so any brave folks out there, we're running out of time. Got a few minutes. If anyone wants to call in, 949-313-8880. I will likely get a ton of emails tomorrow or from the next day when people go, I wished I would have called, and I will refer them to you, Dr. Lynn, to hopefully if they do that, and you can maybe help them or not. I love that there is organizations out there that can let people be supported, and I also want to bring this back around because I think the whole point of the book in the end is that it really just comes down to the fact that it is all about love.
Without question.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that I have tried to do in the book is tell so many stories that illustrate how people do love each other and the loving, funny things that they can say to each other. And I'm in the process now of trying to write a little article that has to do with two different friends of mine. If you want me to, I'll sort of tell you the story.
Sure, go, please. Please do. Please do.
It's fun. Because we don't ever know when, people who are not in their physical bodies have to find a lot of different ways to get in touch. So it's been probably at least a year ago now, and a really dear friend of mine had died, and I didn't learn until after he had died that he had been very interested in birds and had participated in a bird study for a national organization where he counted birds and the species of birds that came into his backyard, and he had done this for years. He was a childhood friend, and we remained friends, but he no longer lived in the same city, so we didn't talk to each other that often, and I didn't even know about this bird thing until after he died. And I was here in my house and had some painters here and was in a room in the house, and this bird came tapping at the door, at a window where I was standing with the painters. And I looked at the bird, and I thought, well, that's nice. This bird is actually tapping on the window. And then we moved into another room, and the bird followed us to that room and was tapping on the window. And I just thought that was really kind of fun. But I had never seen that kind of bird before. And the painters left, and I was seated in my bedroom, which is another end of the house, and heard tapping at the window. And looked, it was the same bird. And with that, I was like, this is really weird. So I went downstairs and found a bird book and tried to find this particular bird. And I found things that looked kind of similar, maybe in the same family or something, but not this particular bird. And so I thought, well, okay, that was an interesting interlude. Until the next day when I was standing at the kitchen sink and I heard tapping at the window and looked up from where I was washing dishes, and there's the same bird. Now, this is on a different floor from the bedrooms and the opposite side of the house. That went on for a couple of weeks, the same bird tapping at different windows, even including in what I call my husband's man cave, and sort of telling him hello. 7 different rooms in the house, this bird tapped to tell us hello over about a 10-day, 2-week period. And then one day, it was tapping, and it was again in my bedroom, and I looked up, and there was a female bird with that male bird that was similar color. And you know how female and male birds look not exactly alike when they're the same species.
Right.
So it looked like a female. And they were being so playful and hilarious. And at that point, I'm like, this is 2 of my friends. After he died, some months later, one of my best friends, who was a female, who he had also known, died. And when she had died, and there's a story in my book, Loving to the End and On, about her, where when she's dying, she tells her daughters, the birds have come to get me. And then one of her daughters, driving home from the hospital after she died, heard birds in the car with her. And at any rate, so I'm looking at them, and I go, this has got to be both of them in bird form playing with me. Now, I can't tell you that's true, but I love thinking that it was these two really good friends of mine, both who had an interest in birds and I had learned about in relationship to their physical deaths, being, at the window talking to me.
Well, yeah.
And, to me it was just absolutely fabulous. And to this day, I feel like I have had a visit from the two of them being funny and playful and fun in ways they would have been in their physical bodies, because both of them, he was extremely smart. I mean, just brilliant. And she had become a good businesswoman after her children were grown, and they both had just hilarious senses of humor. And it just fit them.
Yeah.
That they would be there playing with me, fooling with me.
Well, I certainly don't think that was any fly-by-night thing. No pun intended. But honestly, they just wanted to say hello. We're fine, right?
Well, I think so. And can you ever think of a bird who would show up pecking at windows on, well, my house actually has 3 levels, but on 2 of the levels, in windows on 1, 2, 3, 4 sides of the house?
No, because I have a friend around the corner that has had a bird pecking on her kitchen window for days now, weeks almost, and it just keeps coming back. She put food out there. She's done all kinds of stuff, and it's not a bird that looks like it's native to Southern California where I am. And when she looked up, she went, "Oh, I think it's my mother," who passed away fairly recently.
I wouldn't be surprised. And there's another story in my book about a woman who's loved one particular kind of bird who came and visited in the tree in her yard every year. There were those birds, and she jokingly told her daughters, when I die, I'm going to come back as that bird and tell you hello. And one of the daughters was cleaning out the house after her mother died and heard some commotion in the tree outside of the window and looked outside, and it was not the right season for that bird. And it was not only one of that species of birds, it was a whole flock of them.
Wow.
In the tree, wrong season, but the kind of bird her mother had said, I'll let you know. I'll be back as that bird.
I love that story. I do. Well, the name of the book is Loving to the End and On, A Guide to the Impossibly Possible. We've been talking to Lynn B. Robinson, Ph.D., Dr. Robinson. But also, the book is not just filled with stories like stories like that. It's also filled with some really down-to-earth information for people who might be dealing with people. Like, you had a whole chapter on making better decisions, and you went into, be sure to plan and organize and how to control things and motivate and coordinate staff, because, as people get older, they need care, and there's all kinds of care out there, and it's good to know. It's very informative, Lynn. Very. I liked that aspect. Yeah.
When I used information about caring for my father, and I had a brother and sister, and the 3 of us worked together to do that. My mother predeceased my father, and he wanted to stay in his home until he died, and we were able to do that, with the exception of when he was taken to the hospital because the medications he was taking. I mean, when you get to be 98, there are a number of things in the body that aren't working anymore, or not working effectively anymore. So he was taking several different kinds of medications that had to do with a body that was not functioning as a 20-year-old, or healthy 20-year-olds, or 40-year-olds, or 50-year-olds would. And they were starting to get out of sync. He was having some difficulties, and so they put him in the hospital to try to straighten out the meds, and that was just a whole series of bad mistakes and things that weren't good. And so I used that as an example, and then later in the chapter on how to have managed that better, I again used some examples of what we learned in caring for our father and how we had set up a whole system in his house with round-the-clock caregivers, and the three of us going there, my brother and sister and I, at different times of the day and night, just to check on him. And it becomes a process. And even if it's just one person living with one other person, there is still a lot to take care of.
Absolutely. And especially, you talked about one woman an elderly woman and the caregivers were like, she's not eating right, but all she wanted to eat was bananas and chocolate. And you know what? That was like, if you want to eat bananas and chocolate and you're, 102 years old, go ahead.
Exactly. That actually was my grandmother, and we just kind of got the giggles. She was, we had not been able to keep her in home. She needed more care than that, so she was in a care facility where they, could keep an eye on her 24/7. There were nurses in and out and so forth, and though it wasn't a hospital situation. And as I said in the book, one of the nurses was saying, we just can't get her to eat. The only thing she wants is bananas and chocolate. And I just got the giggles.
Yeah, just give her that.
Let her eat it.
Yeah, just give her that.
The woman was dying. What difference did it make?
It doesn't make any difference. When I'm a cancer survivor, it was just last year, and I was diagnosed with a very rare form of ovarian cancer. And I went through chemotherapy, and everything's good now. Knock wood. I am knocking wood. I'm knocking. Anyway, all I wanted, they said, you got to eat, because that's tough stuff, chemo. And I said, all I want is carrot cake. And the doctor said, then eat carrot cake. And I did. And I never got skinny. I never got emancipated. I just ate carrot cake every day. That's what I did. So when I read that, I went, good for you for telling them. Give her the bananas. Give her the chocolate. See, that's what I like about this book. It's full of things like that. So I had to mention that because it's not, it's very practical too. It's not just talking to dead people. It's got some really good advice in there, and I think I'm going to highly recommend it. Loving to the end and on. We're winding down. The subtitle I love, A Guide to the Impossibly Possible. Your website is lynnbrobinson.com, and it's LYNNB Robinson, ROBINSON, all one word, .com. Is there anything, we're out of time, so is there anything else that I didn't ask you? I know a lot of people didn't call in, but this is a touchy subject, so sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. But I'm sure you might hear from people, and I know I will later. But is there anything else you wanted to add to this that we didn't discuss?
This is going to probably sound funny to a lot of people. In fact, it sounds a little weird to me, too. But, enjoy the time you have, even when you're with your family members and your loved ones who are obviously uncomfortable because their body is breaking down. It's a wonderful time to be able to sit there and hold hands, and they will feel you. It's another thing I mentioned, I think, in the book is that hearing is the last thing to go. I'm not sure it's still physical hearing, by the way.
Right.
I think sometimes they hear outside of their body, but they do hear and frequently respond, and there are examples in the book of people snuggling up next to someone who is dying and thinking they don't know, but they do. And there's one specific example, I think, where someone is holding her mother's hand and says something, and the mother squeezes it. There's another example where a family is playing some gospel music for the grandmother who's like 101 and is slowly leaving her body, and as the music is playing, I think it was Elvis Presley, and this is just a few years ago, and this woman's in her, like 101, 102, whatever, and she lifts her hands and begins keeping time with the music with her fingers.
Oh.
And, a few minutes later, she's not in her body anymore.
Right.
But they were playing some of her favorite gospel music. She liked gospel music.
Wow.
I mean, somebody else might like Beethoven or Bach or whatever.
Whatever. Yeah. I think that's
so
so
just
cool.
Enjoy those few moments together. It sounds macabre to some people, and some people can't. And I do want to mention that also. I've talked to people who said, I just couldn't be in the room. That's okay. I even know of some instances where people who are dying wait until their loved one has left because they know that person
it'll be too hard.
Can't handle it.
Yeah, exactly.
So do what's comfortable, but it's okay to enjoy those last moments, even when with the death rattle breathing and the limbs begin to change colors. I mean, there are a lot of things that happen in those last few moments, but those moments are still there and available to you if you can do it. Not everybody can.
No, and I think that's true. I think that any way you can continue to share love till the very end and on, as your book is called, and now I know why. Loving to the end and on. You have been so delightful. Thank you so much for being on the show. And if you continue and write another book, let me know, because you'll be back.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I've loved talking to you, and I hope together that we've been helpful for some folks out there, and
Me too.
That they'll share their stories.
Amen. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Take care, and good night. I appreciate it very much. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. That was a fabulous show. I love her. And again, her name is Lynn B. Robinson. She's a Ph.D. And she wrote a book called Loving to the End and On. So you can get that anywhere. I know you can get it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And you can go to her website as well. It's lynnbrobinson.com. And you can find me at servethassan.com, servethasan.com. We do have new things coming in the fall, and as soon as autumn hits or thereabouts, I know I've been talking about it for a long time, new website, new blogs, new everything is coming out, and an actual completely new, different website as well. So we'll get into all of that. I've got some great guests coming up too in the near future, so stay tuned, because it's all getting not just good, but better and better and better. So, yeah, thanks for joining me tonight. And you know what I'm going to say now. I'm going to say be you to the full, because that's what's really beautiful. This is all about touching into your authentic self, even if your authentic self is talking to people who are on the other side. This is part of who we are. Don't hide things. Be who you are. Be yourself. Be your authentic, true self. And then things come easily and more effortlessly, because you're then going in the flow and things open up naturally. And they call that synchronicity, but it's just about you being your authentic self. Be you to the full. That's what's truly beautiful. Love you all, and stay tuned for another great show next week. Take care. Good night.